The Thing in the Fog. Ethan had been guiding for nearly a decade. He knew the mountains better than most people knew their own neighborhoods. Every bend in the trail, every jagged outcropping of stone, every place where the forest grew unnaturally quiet. It was all mapped in his mind. He loved his work, leading groups of hikers through rugged terrain, pointing out rare birds or plants, teaching them how to read animal tracks. It all gave him a sense of purpose. But there was one night, one trip, that stripped all comfort from the wilderness. A night when the mountain he thought of as home turned into something alien, and he realized that not everything living out there could be named or explained. It was late autumn when Ethan led a group of 4 into the high ridges. They were an eager mix of adventurers, a young couple named Mark and Tessa, a college student named Louise, and a middle-aged woman named Dana who wanted one last big adventure before winter settled in. The plan was to hike up to Bear Hollow, camp overnight, and descend the next day. Ethan had done it dozens of times. It was a straightforward trek, though the trails could get foggy and disorienting after sundown. He made sure everyone carried extra layers, headlamps, and enough food to last longer than they'd need. The rule out here is simple, he told them. The mountain doesn't care about you. Respect it, and it might let you walk away. They laughed at his seriousness, but he meant every word. The fog. By late afternoon, clouds began to roll in over the ridge. The air grew damp, and Ethan could taste a metallic bite of weather turning sour. They pressed on, but by the time they reached the upper hollow, fog had swallowed the trail. It hung low and thick, clinging to their clothes, muffling their voices, warping the light from their headlamps into useless halos. "This is like walking through soup," Mark muttered. "Stay close," Ethan ordered. "Fog plays tricks on your ears. Makes a forest sound different." It wasn't just the sound. The woods looked wrong. Trees loomed like misshapen giants. Rocks that Ethan knew should have been familiar landmarks now looked foreign, alien, almost alive in the shifting haze. They set up camp quickly, pitching their tents in a small clearing near a cluster of boulders. Ethan built a fire, though the damp made it sputter and smoke. The hikers huddled close, telling stories and trying to laugh off their unease. But Ethan noticed something. The forest was too quiet. No crickets, no owls, not even the faint scurry of small animals. Only fog, only silence. The first sign. It started when Dana went to the tree lean to relieve herself. She returned pale, her voice shaking. "I saw something," she whispered. Ethan frowned. "What did you see?" "A person," she said. "Tall, standing between the trees. Just watching." Mark scoffed. "It's fog. Shadows and trees look like people all the time." But Dana shook her head violently. "No, it wasn't a shadow. It moved. It was there, then it wasn't." Ethan's gut tightened. He knew fog could make people see things that weren't there, but he also knew the fear in Dana's voice wasn't imagined. "Everyone stays by the fire tonight," he said firmly. The knock. Sometime after midnight. Ethan woke to a sound. A knock. 3 sharp raps, like knuckles against wood. He sat up in his tent, every nerve alert. The fire outside had burned low, but enough embers glowed to cast faint orange light. Again, knock, knock, knock. He crawled out, scanning the clearing. His group was asleep, their tents zipped shut. The sound came from the tree lean. Ethan stepped forward cautiously, headlamp cutting through the mist. There, half hidden by fog, stood a figure, tall, thin, still, its head cocked unnaturally to the side, as though bones bent where they shouldn't. It raised an arm and rapped its knuckles against a tree. Knock, knock, knock. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He flicked his light directly onto it, and the figure melted into the fog. The panic. By dawn, the hikers were restless and uneasy. Dana refused to leave her tent until Ethan coaxed her out. "We need to head down," he said firmly. "Now." They packed in tense silence and set out down the trail. But the fog hadn't lifted. If anything, it had thickened. The forest seemed endless, each turn identical, each step swallowed by mist. Ethan knew the trail by heart, but unease gnawed at him. Landmarks were missing. Rocks and trees looked rearranged. "Are we lost?" Luis asked, voice trembling. No, Ethan lied. Then the sound came again. Knock, knock, knock. Somewhere behind them. They froze. The fog pressed close, muting the sound yet somehow amplifying it, as if the knock had been inside their heads. Dana whimpered. It's following us. The chase. They quickened their pace, but the knocking followed. Sometimes close, sometimes distant, sometimes directly ahead, as though the thing was circling them. Then came a new sound, laughter, low, distorted, like a voice dragged through water. Mark snapped. What the hell is this? Some psycho in the woods messing with us. But Ethan knew better. He had heard human laughter. This was not human. The fog shifted, and the figure appeared again, closer this time. Its limbs were too long, its mouth stretched too wide. The grin didn't move as it laughed, a grotesque mask fixed in place. Run! Ethan shouted. They broke into a sprint, crashing through the trees, abandoning the trail entirely. The escape, by some miracle, they stumbled onto a logging road. The fog thinned enough for Ethan to recognize where they were. Downhill, he barked. Don't stop. They barreled down the road until fog began to burn away. In the weak daylight, the knocking faded. The laughter ceased. When they finally reached the ranger station at the base, every one of them was pale and trembling. They never spoke of what happened in detail, not even to the rangers who asked why they looked so shaken. But Dana pulled Ethan aside as the others were picked up by their families. It wanted us, she whispered. You know that, don't you? Ethan didn't answer. He didn't need to. He had spent years in those mountains, seen storms, wild animals, even men with bad intentions. But he had never seen anything like what stalked him in the fog. And he knew one thing for certain. Whatever it wasn't gone. It had let them go. And someday it would knock again. The river that whispers. Trail guides often say that rivers have personalities. Some are calm and gentle. Others are violent and temperamental. Ethan's story from the fog was terrifying, but it wasn't the only kind of nightmare a guide could face. For Claire, the river was where she learned that sometimes nature speaks back, and not all of its words are meant for the living. The assignment. Claire had been guiding in the Pacific Northwest for 5 years. She specialized in multi-day treks that followed winding river trails through dense forest. She loved the remoteness, the feeling of being truly away from civilization. In mid-July, she was hired to lead a father and his 2 teenage sons on a 5-day hike along the Halstrom River. It was a rugged trail, known for its beauty but also for its isolation. I want my boys to experience something real, the father, Greg, had said when he booked the trip. Not just campgrounds and picnic tables. The real wilderness. Claire agreed. She knew the Halstrom well. Its narrow bends, its steep banks, the places where mist lingered over the water like breath. But she also knew its reputation. Locals whispered about the river. They said if you camped too close to it, you'd hear voices at night. Some claimed people had followed those voices into the woods and never returned. Claire had always dismissed the stories as folklore. She wasn't superstitious. She trusted maps, training, and her own experience. Until that trip, the first night, the hike began smoothly. Greg was enthusiastic, though a little out of shape, while his sons, Tyler and Jordan, were more interested in their phones and the scenery. But as they hiked deeper, their cell signals vanished, and they gradually began to engage with the wilderness. By evening, they made camp beside a wide bend of the river. The air was cool, the water reflecting the last gold of the sun. Claire cooked while the boys skipped stones. Greg leaned back against a log, satisfied. This is perfect, he said. But as night fell, the river's character changed. The water sounded louder somehow, rushing against rocks with a rhythm that almost resembled words. Claire lay awake in her tent, listening. At first, it was just white noise, but slowly she began to pick out patterns. A rise and fall like murmuring voices. Faint, indistinguishable, but there. She told herself it was her imagination. She had heard about river talk before. The wave-flowing water can trick your brain into hearing speech. Still, she didn't sleep much. The second day, The next day was harder. The trail narrowed along steep banks, the river roaring beside them. Tyler complained about the weight of his pack. Jordan slipped and nearly tumbled into the current. But by late afternoon, spirits lifted again when they reached another campsite, a flat clearing with soft moss and a fire ring. That night, after the fire burned low, Claire heard it again. Whispers. This time, she wasn't alone. Tyler sat up in his tent, calling out nervously, "Dad? Who's talking?" Greg frowned. "Nobody, son. Go back to sleep." But Claire could see he was uneasy. He heard it too. By the third day, the group was tired and irritable. The trail grew wilder, less maintained, choked by roots and brambles. At lunch, Claire noticed Greg staring at the river with a troubled expression. "You hear it too, don't you?" he asked quietly, out of earshot of his sons. Claire hesitated. "It's just the water. It plays tricks." Greg shook his head. "No. Last night it said my name." Claire forced a laugh, but dread coiled in her stomach. That evening, the whispers returned. Louder, clearer. Claire sat rigid in her tent, straining to make sense of them. And then she heard it. A word. Her name. Claire. Soft, drawn out, carried by the current. Her blood turned cold. The disappearance. On the fourth morning, they woke to find Tyler missing. Panic tore through the camp. His tent was empty, his pack still inside. Claire found his footprints leading down to the riverbank. And then nothing, just water. "Tyler!" Greg's voice cracked as he screamed his son's name over and over, the sound swallowed by the rushing current. Jordan cried, clutching his father's arm. Claire scanned the river, heart pounding. No signs of fall, no torn fabric or dropped belongings. It was as if the boy had simply walked into the water and vanished. But she remembered his voice the night before. "Dad? Who's talking?" Had the whispers called him? The search. They spent hours searching, but found no trace. Greg wanted to keep going downstream, convinced they'd find Tyler ahead. Claire wasn't so sure. Every instinct screamed at her to turn back. But Greg refused. "I won't leave my son out here." So they pressed on. That night, they didn't build a fire. They sat in silence, waiting, listening. The river seemed louder than ever, its whispers unmistakable now. Words laced through the current, overlapping, taunting. Greg, Jordan, Claire. Jordan whimpered. "Dad, it's saying my name." Greg held him close, his face pale with terror. Claire didn't sleep at all. The last night, near midnight, Claire heard movement. She bolted upright, flashlight in hand. Jordan's sleeping bag was empty. "Greg!" she shouted. They both scrambled to the riverbank. And there was Jordan, standing barefoot at the edge of the water. His eyes were wide, unfocused, his lips moving as if in silent conversation. Claire lunged, grabbing his arm. "Jordan, step back." The boy resisted, straining toward the current. "They're calling me," he whispered. Greg grabbed his other arm. Sobbing. Together, they hauled him back from the water's edge. The river roared. Furious, the whispers rising to a cacophony of voices. Claire swore she saw shapes beneath the surface, hands, faces, pale and grasping, reaching upward before vanishing in the churn. The escape. At dawn they fled. No breakfast, no break, no words. Just raw, desperate speed down the trail. The whispers followed them, sometimes ahead, sometimes behind, sometimes right beside them, though the river was nowhere in sight. When at last they stumbled onto the gravel parking lot at the trailhead, the voices ceased. Just like that, Greg collapsed, holding Jordan tightly. Tears streamed down his face. Tyler was gone. Aftermath. Authorities searched for weeks. Divers combed the hailstorm. Rangers scoured the banks. No sign of Tyler was ever found. Officially, it was ruled an accident. A boy lost in the wilderness, likely swept away by the current. But Claire knew the truth. The river had taken him, and it had tried to take Jordan too. She never guided on the hailstorm again. Yet sometimes, on quiet nights, she swears she can still hear it. That low, rushing murmur, calling her name. the Watcher in the canyon. Some landscapes feel alive. The desert was like that, breathing, shifting, hiding secrets in its heat-shimmering dunes and endless stone. For Marcus, a veteran trail guide, the desert was both a home and a challenge. He knew how to read its signs. The way shadows told time on rock faces, the way animal prints revealed movement, the way silence itself was a warning. But there was one canyon he never forgot, one trip where silence wasn't a warning, but the sign that something was already there, watching. The canyon. It was late spring, just before the desert's brutal summer heat made trips dangerous. Marcus led for clients. Lena, a writer researching ancient desert tribes. Thomas and Emily, a young couple hoping to photograph the stars. Ray, a retired soldier who wanted to test his endurance. The plan was a 5-day loop through Red Scar Canyon, a place of towering sandstone cliffs and winding passages carved by centuries of wind. Marcus knew the canyon had history. Petroglyphs scarred the walls, depicting figures with long limbs and hollow eyes. Some said the tribes who carved them vanished without explanation. Locals avoided Red Scar at night. They said the rocks carried voices, that the canyon didn't like being crossed. Marcus didn't believe in superstitions. He believed in preparation, in maps, in survival skills. Until Red Scar proved otherwise. First signs. The first day was easy. They hiked through open desert, the canyon walls growing taller with every mile. By late afternoon, the shadows stretched long and the air cooled. That night, they camped beneath an overhang. The stars were brilliant, and Emily squealed with joy when she captured the Milky Way on her camera. It should have been peaceful. But Marcus noticed something strange. The coyotes were silent. No yips, no howls. Even the wind seemed muted, as if the canyon swallowed sound. When he asked Lena what she thought, she frowned at the petroglyphs carved above their camp. "They look like they're watching us," she whispered. Figures with oversized eyes stared down from the rock. Marcus told her not to worry, but unease twisted in his gut. The second night, the group made good progress the next day, winding deeper into the canyon. Sheer cliffs rose on either side, blotting out the horizon. At dusk, they camped on a flat stretch of sand. Marcus built a fire, and the hikers ate in tired silence. Then, faintly came a sound, a scrape of stone on stone. Everyone froze. Ray gripped his knife. What was that? Marcus scanned the canyon walls with his flashlight. Nothing. Just red rock, flickering shadows, and silence. Probably rocks settling, he said, though his heart hammered. But then came another sound. Closer. A long, deliberate crunch of footsteps in gravel. Thomas whispered, "Someone's out there." Marcus raised his hand, signaling them to stay quiet. He swept the canyon with his light again. And there, just for a moment, he saw movement. A figure, tall and thin, retreating into the shadows. The Watcher. The next day, they were all on edge. No one spoke much. They moved quickly, as though distance could put the canyon behind them. But the feeling of being watched never left. Every time Marcus glanced at the cliffs, he swore he saw a silhouette just at the edge of his vision. Long arms, still posture, staring. By evening, Emily broke down. "I don't like this. There's someone following us." Ray growled. "Then let him come closer. I'll deal with him." But Marcus shook his head. "No, that's exactly what it wants." They set camp in silence. That night, Marcus took first watch. The desert cooled, the fire burned low, and the canyon walls glowed faintly under moonlight. Then he heard it again. Stone scraping, gravel crunching, slow, steady footsteps circling the camp. Marcus stood, shining his light into the dark. And there it was, a figure on the ridge above, its limbs impossibly long, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. Its eyes, if those black pits could be called eyes, reflected the firelight like glass. It didn't move. It just watched. The attack. By the fourth day, the group was unraveling. Emily begged to turn back. Thomas snapped at her. Lena scribbled frantically in her journal, muttering about spirits in the rock. Ray stayed silent, knife in hand, scanning the cliffs like a soldier in enemy territory. Marcus tried to stay calm. One more day. We'll clear the canyon tomorrow. But that night, the watcher came closer. The footsteps were louder. Stones fell as if knocked loose by something heavy. Then, in the dead of night, Emily screamed. Marcus bolted up to see her being dragged toward the shadows. Thomas lunged, grabbing her arm. Ray charged, knife flashing. Marcus's light fell on the thing, pulling her. It was tall. Too tall. Its body thin as a shadow, stretched across stone, limbs bending the wrong way. Its face was featureless except for those hollow eyes, gleaming with hunger. When the light hit it, it let go, melting back into the dark. Emily sobbed, clutching Thomas. Ray stood panting, blade ready. Marcus's stomach dropped. The canyon wasn't just haunted. It was hunting. The last march. They didn't sleep. At dawn, they packed quickly and moved. The canyon felt endless, the walls closing tighter, the sun a thin line above. The watcher followed. They heard it everywhere. Footsteps echoing, stones scraping, breaths carried on the wind. Lena whispered, "It won't let us leave." Marcus kept pushing. "Keep moving. Don't stop." By afternoon, they saw it again, on the cliffs, in the shadows, always just ahead. Ray finally snapped. He charged toward it, yelling, knife raised. "Come on, you bastard." The thing didn't retreat this time. It moved. Fast. Ray's scream echoed through the canyon. When they reached him, he was gone. Only his knife lay in the sand, the blade slick with something black. The escape. The survivors ran. No more pacing, no more caution. Just raw, desperate flight. The watcher pursued. Stones crashed behind them. Footsteps thundered. Shadows lengthened as if stretching to grab them. At last, the canyon walls began to widen. The cliffs lowered. The sky opened. They burst onto open desert, sunlight blazing. And the sound stopped. The watcher did not follow. They stumbled to a ranger outpost miles later, half delirious, missing one of their group. Aftermath. Search teams combed Red Scar Canyon for Ray. They found no trace. No body. No blood. Nothing but endless rock. Marcus never returned to Red Scar. Lena published her book, but she cut the canyon story, calling it too unbelievable. Thomas and Emily broke up within a year. Neither spoke of what happened, but Marcus knew the truth. The canyon was alive. It had a guardian, a watcher, and if you dared to cross it, you became part of its silence. The forest of echoes. For most trail guides, forests are a comfort. They provide shelter, food, firewood. They're familiar, predictable, alive, but in a way that feels manageable. For Sarah, guiding in the northern forest was her calling. Towering pines, endless lakes, misty mornings. It was where she felt at home. But there was one stretch of wilderness she never returned to. A forest where the trees whispered, where echoes didn't fade away, and where something inhuman repeated your own voice back to you. The new group. Sarah had led dozens of treks, from family-friendly loops to grueling 2-week expeditions. She prided herself on her patience and her ability to keep hikers calm. This trip was supposed to be simple. For clients, 3 nights, a scenic trail around Lake Maddox. The group included Mark, a college student with a love for photography, Elise and Hannah, sisters who wanted to reconnect with nature, Derek, a quiet man in his 40s who barely spoke. It was late September, when the forest turned red and gold, and the nights carried a sharp bite of winter. The first day was beautiful. They hiked through crisp air, the crunch of leaves beneath their boots. Mark stopped often to snap photos, while Elise and Hannah chatted nonstop. Derek lingered in the back, silent, watching. Sarah noticed but didn't press. Some hikers just like to keep to themselves. The first echo. That night, they camped near the lake. The water mirrored the stars perfectly, and the forest was alive with the chirps of crickets. It should have been peaceful. But as Sarah dozed in her tent, she heard something strange. Her name, soft, distant, drifting through the trees. Sarah, she sat up, heart pounding. It came again, fainter. Sarah, she unzipped the tent, shining her flashlight into the trees. Nothing, just shadows and stillness. She told herself it was the sisters playing a prank, or maybe Mark calling in his sleep. But when she checked, everyone was sound asleep. The second day, the group pressed on, following a narrow trail that wound deep into the pines. Mark snapped photos constantly, marveling at the light breaking through the canopy. Elise and Hannah laughed and picked berries. But Derek, he watched the trees. Every so often, he turned suddenly, as if he'd heard something behind him. At lunch, Sarah asked if he was all right. "They're repeating us," he said quietly. Sarah frowned. "What do you mean?" "The forest. It echoes, but not right." She brushed it off, but unease lingered. That night, as they sat around the fire, Elise told a story about a woman who vanished in the woods. She laughed nervously at her own tale, and then from the trees came the same laugh, perfectly copied. The group froze. Mark's flashlight snapped toward the sound. The forest stood silent, but the air felt heavy. "That was an echo," Elise whispered, but her voice trembled. An echo shouldn't sound that close, or that human. By the third day, the group was uneasy. They hiked faster, conversation sparse. The forest seemed darker, the trees leaning inward, closing the trail. At one point, Mark stopped suddenly. "Did you hear that?" They all did, a perfect repetition of his words, spoken from deep within the trees. "Did you hear that?" The mimicry was exact, the same tone, the same pitch, but the timing was wrong. Too delayed, too deliberate. Elise grabbed Sarah's arm. "Someone's out there." Sarah tried to steady her. "It's just an echo off the cliffs." But she didn't believe it herself. The vanishing. That night, Sarah insisted on strict rules. No wandering, no leaving camp alone, no late-night exploring. But sometime after midnight, she woke to the sound of Hannah's voice, laughing, calling, "Elise, come here. You have to see this." Sarah bolted upright. Elise was still in her tent, asleep. The laugh came again, identical, playful, but drifting from the trees. And then a scream. They rushed out with flashlights. Hannah's sleeping bag was empty. Her footprints led into the forest, vanishing among the roots. "Han!" Elise sobbed, calling into the night, and the forest called back. "Han! Han! Han!" Each echo grew fainter, deeper, as if being carried farther into the trees. They searched until dawn. Nothing. The breaking point. The next day, Elise refused to move. She sat by the fire ring, staring at the woods. "It has her," she muttered. The forest took her. Mark wanted to push forward, to get back to the trailhead. Derek nodded silently. Sarah had to choose. She convinced Elise to move, promising they'd find Hannah. But Elise's eyes were glassy, her steps unsteady. By afternoon, Mark disappeared. One moment he was there, crouched with his camera. The next, gone. They found his camera in the dirt. The last photo showed a blur of trees, and a figure between them. Tall, thin, its face wrong, like a stretched mask of Mark's own features. The forest speaks. That night, only four remained. The forest didn't whisper anymore. It spoke. Voices overlapped in the trees. Mark's, Hannah's. Strangers they didn't know. Laughter, screams, sobs, conversations. All repeating, distorted, echoing endlessly. Elise broke down, sobbing. It has their voices. It's using them. Derek, usually calm, trembled. It's not an echo. It's a lure. Sarah tried to keep them close, but sometime in the night, Elise ran. She sprinted into the trees, chasing her sister's voice. Her screams faded, and the forest echoed them back. The last stand. By morning, only Sarah and Derek remained. They packed quickly, hiking with desperate speed. The forest pressed closer, every step heavy with dread. Then, ahead, they heard it, their own voices. "We have to get out. Hurry. Faster." It was them, perfectly copied, but coming from deeper in the woods. Derek froze. "It's ahead of us." Sarah grabbed his arm. "Don't listen. Just move." But Derek pulled away. "It's everywhere." And then his voice echoed from the trees. "It's everywhere. Something moved between the trunks. A tall figure. Its face a shifting blur of features. Hannah's laugh, Mark's grin, Elisa's sobbing eyes, all flickering like reflections on water. Derek screamed, charging at it. The forest swallowed him whole. The escape. Sarah ran. She didn't stop to think, didn't stop to breathe. She tore through branches, stumbled over roots, ignoring the chorus of voices chasing her. Sarah, Sarah, her own voice mocked her, overlapping with the others, but she didn't stop. Hours later, she burst onto a dirt road. Civilization. Silence. The forest behind her stood still, as if nothing had happened. Aftermath. Rescue teams searched for weeks. No trace of Hannah, Elise, Mark, or Derek was ever found. Sarah told authorities what happened. They wrote it off as exhaustion, trauma, hallucinations. But she knew. The forest of echoes doesn't let you leave with everyone you came in with. It takes voices, faces, lives. And sometimes, on still nights, Sarah swears she hears her own voice calling from the trees.